Hello, everyone. I am Madelene Mielke, President and CEO of APAICS, the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. I am thrilled to welcome you to the annual APAICS Energy and Sustainability Summit. We are honored to have you all here today to discuss the evolving landscape of sustainability and the impact that these changes have on the Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, AA, and NHPI community. The APAICS Energy and Sustainability Summit brings together industry and community leaders alongside AA and NHPI members of Congress to discuss top-line energy concerns that are affecting the AA and NHPI community and the nation at large. We are honored to have a distinguished group of speakers who will share their insights and expertise on how the work of increasing sustainability and fighting for environmental justice has shaped our political, social, and economic landscapes, and how it will continue to impact our communities in the future. Our panel topics today range from AA and NHPI representation in the energy sector, challenges and opportunities with energy transition, the future of mobility and transportation, as well as the potential effects of new energy infrastructure legislation and what our partners are doing to adapt to these changing conditions. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our summit partners, Amazon, Delta, Toyota, API, BP, Comcast, DoorDash, Exelon, Walmart, and to all of our special guest speakers, panelists, and moderators. Your support enables APAICS to fulfill its mission of promoting Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander participation and representation at all levels of the political process, from community service to elected office. It is my honor to introduce KPAC Associate Member Congressman Scott Peters to deliver opening remarks for the APAICS 2023 Energy and Sustainability Summit. Representing California's 50th Congressional District and first elected in 2012, he currently serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the House Budget Committee, and the House Equality Caucus. As a member of Congress, Representative Peters focuses on advancing practical and critical climate policies, promoting and expanding San Diego's innovation ecosystem, advocating for San Diego's pivotal role as a partner in national defense, and making government work. Let's welcome Congressman Peters.
Hi, I'm Congressman Scott Peters from San Diego, California, and I'm so glad to be here with you virtually for the Asian Pacific and American Institute for Congressional Studies Energy and Sustainability Summit. Our country prides itself on accomplishing big things, whether it's winning world wars, constructing interstate highway system, or discovering the next medical breakthrough. We've acted with urgency to face our greatest challenges in the past, but today we're debating on whether a decade is the appropriate amount of time to construct a single high-voltage transmission line, one offshore wind plant, or a geothermal plant. Last Congress, we provided record funding to build a cleaner and more secure energy system through historic legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This Congress, we need to work on speed, because we can have all the money in the world, but we will still fail if we don't act faster. This isn't a problem we can solve on our own, which is why I'm so thankful for your efforts and your participation in this conversation. As you know, there's a lot of work to do, and the stakes are incredibly high. According to research from Princeton University, 80% of the projected emission reductions from the Inflation Reduction Act depend on building transmission faster. 80%. To hit our climate goals, we need to build 200,000 miles of new high-voltage transmission lines by the 2030s, and over the last decade, we've just built 1,800 miles per year, because each one takes more than 10 years to complete. And it's not just transmission that's delayed. According to a new report from Boston Consulting Group, permitting timelines have doubled since the 1970s, and nearly half of all clean energy projects are delayed by the permit process, compared to only 15% of fossil fuel projects. In the 1970s, our environmental priority was to stop dirty projects. We were on defense. But now, if we want to cut our emissions in time and build the green infrastructure of the future, our country needs to go on the offense. We have NEPA to thank for a great deal of environmental preservation, but its implementation is inevitably slow, with documents that are thousands of pages long and reviews that can take more than 4 years to complete. So I'm continuing to work with my colleagues in both parties to push forward a comprehensive permitting reform package that will help us meet our climate goals, improve community input, and fix the broken judicial process. We'll need all your help and input to build support for these proposals and get them across the finish line. So thanks for your leadership, your service, your passion, and thank you again for having me. I wish all of you the best with the rest of your conference, and stay in touch.
Thank you, Congressman Peters, for your opening remarks. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Senator Tammy Duckworth to deliver opening remarks for our first panel of today's summit, the Clean Energy Transition, Challenges and Opportunities. Senator Duckworth is an Iraq War veteran, Purple Heart recipient, and former Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. She served in the Reserve Forces for 23 years before retiring at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in 2014. After representing Illinois' 8th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives for 2 terms, Senator Duckworth was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2016. 2 of her key committee assignments include Armed Services, as well as Science and Transportations Committee. She co-founded the Senate's first ever Environmental Justice Caucus and continues to serve the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, CAPAC, as an executive Senate member. Please welcome Senator Duckworth.
Hi, everyone. First off, I want to thank the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies for inviting me to participate in this year's summit. We all know that the expansion of clean energy is a critically important way that we can tackle the climate crisis and build a more resilient, affordable, and sustainable future for our kids and for our kids' kids. Thanks to Democrats' leadership, we have been able to secure significant support to help our country move forward towards that green energy future, with laws like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, allocating tens of billions of dollars to invest in American manufacturing, American workers, and the expansion of the kind of reliable, affordable clean energy that will help our children breathe cleaner air and our nation build the technologies of tomorrow. It doesn't just stop there. Now, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden signed into law a little more than a year ago, we can expect to see even more growth in this sector. In fact, we could see about 1 million good-paying clean energy jobs added every year to our economy for the next 10 years. The IRA was the largest investment in clean energy production in our nation's history. It has made it cheaper for companies to manufacture the equipment needed to produce renewable energy and to build and operate clean energy infrastructures using solar, wind, geothermal technology, and more. Since it was signed into law, hundreds of clean energy projects have already been announced across the country, while new incentives and tax credits are helping families and companies to save money while making the switch to clean energy. We're already seeing results, and there's still so much more to come. Because as each of you know, supporting green manufacturing and green energy benefits us all in an infinite number of ways. We're creating jobs, saving money, and developing a more sustainable, healthier world, not just for ourselves, but for our future generations. So thank you for being my partners on the front lines of this work, and I mean this world, so that we can also help change the world for the better too. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. It is now my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Doris Matsui, who has represented the city of Sacramento and its surrounding area since 2005. As a senior member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, she serves as the ranking member of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee and as a member of the Energy, Climate, and Grid Security Subcommittee. She is committed to strengthening Sacramento's flood protection, ensuring quality, affordable health care for all, growing our clean energy economy, and promoting innovation and equity in technology. Sitting at the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers, the Sacramento area has one of the highest flood risks in the country. Congresswoman Matsui has long led the charge to secure federal funding to address these risks, securing over $4 billion in investments for local flood prevention. With climate change bringing more frequent, intense, and unpredictable weather patterns, her role in delivering funding for flood control and infrastructure projects is even more critical. Please welcome Representative Matsui.
Hi, everyone. It is wonderful to join all of you today at the APAICS Energy and Sustainability Summit. Thank you to Madelene and everyone at APAICS for inviting me to speak today. This is a really important time to have these discussions, to think bigger, learn from each other, and chart a path forward. We all know that the climate crisis is the defining challenge of our lives. Its reach will be global, but its impact will be local for everyone. From sea level rise to extreme heat to air pollution, the climate crisis is already here, and its effects are being felt acutely by many members of the AANHPI community, here and abroad. Now that's why it's critical that we accelerate the clean energy transition. Renewable energy can lower Americans' bills, reduce pollution, and power our industries, all while addressing climate change. As co-chair of the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, my colleagues and I are committed to a full systems approach to deliver real results for the American people. Now, the good news is that we are actually making great progress. Both the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act are transformational investments in a cleaner future. It's really no secret. The energy sector is one of the most polluting sectors across the nation. Now that's why I fought for investments to secure our clean energy supply chain, build on our existing supply of fossil-free generation, and make sure we have a resilient, modern grid moving forward. A year ago, I spoke to a lot of you here about how the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is charting a more sustainable path forward. Today, the IRA is building on that track record. The Inflation Reduction Act is the largest climate action investment in our country's history. This bill is catalyzing change across all sectors in America. The IRA has already created over 170,000 good-paying jobs in clean energy, transportation, and manufacturing. It's helping families make their homes greener and more sustainable, all while cutting their energy costs and saving them money. These investments are not just going to benefit our generation, but our children and grandchildren. Over the next decade, the IRA will direct billions of dollars to cut carbon emissions and build a greener, more resilient economy. When we talk on the scale of billions of dollars, I know it can be hard to understand what each of us as individuals can do to make an impact. What we can do is to be part of the solution. My bill, the Clean Energy Victory Bonds Act, would do just that. It gives everyday Americans the opportunity to buy bonds that invest in energy efficiency, solar, wind, geothermal, and electric vehicle efforts. Together with the enormous investments from the IRA and the ILJA, this is the full systems approach we need to tackle the climate crisis. Here in the AA-NHPI community, we have an important role to play to ensure these policies are rolled out in an equitable fashion. Those of us here know that not all of the AA-NHPI communities will feel equal effects of this crisis, and what's more, not all communities have equal access to the resources needed to deal with it. There are still substantial disparities that we must address. And that's why I've been working hard to ensure that my colleagues and I prioritize environmental justice as a central pillar of our discussions. The clean energy transition is an opportunity to help uplift our most vulnerable communities, but only if we work for it. As the Biden administration rolls out many of these investments, and as we keep working on solutions in Congress, it is absolutely imperative that we remain focused on policies that will accelerate clean energy deployment that serves all Americans. Climate change is happening all around us. Clean energy is a critical part of our roadmap for creating a sustainable future, and we must all do our part. Now, I want to thank everyone at APAICS for inviting me to speak today, and please enjoy this important panel.
Thank you, Congresswoman Matsui. It is now my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Kim Schreier, who represents Washington's 8th Congressional District. Congresswoman Schreier helped pass the Inflation Reduction Act and specifically advocated for boosting clean energy manufacturing in the United States, creating credits for new and used electric vehicles, investing in a reliable 21st century electric grid, providing home energy efficiency rebates, reducing air pollution by providing funding to ports to reduce emissions, and cracking down on oil and gas companies that have significant methane leakage. Additionally, Congresswoman Schreier introduced a provision with support from Mom's Clean Air Force to maintain strict standards around mercury air toxins and ensure that all children can breathe clean air. Please welcome Congresswoman Schreier.
Hello, APAICS. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this year's Energy and Sustainability Summit. I'm Congresswoman Kim Schreier from Washington's 8th Congressional District, representing parts of Western and Central Washington. The panel you're about to participate in is entitled The Clean Energy Transition: Challenges and Opportunities. During this panel, you'll hear about the exciting new possibilities as well as the hurdles in reaching a modernized and clean energy grid. As the vice-ranking member on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I've had the opportunity to discuss and pose questions on how we can transform the grid to be more reliable, affordable, and clean. And through this work, I understand how critical it is that we modernize our electric grid to include clean energy and reach our net zero climate goals. One of the ways we can produce clean energy is through green hydrogen. And that's why I led a bipartisan effort to bring federal funding to the Pacific Northwest to catalyze the region's clean hydrogen sector through the Department of Energy's Hydrogen Hub program. And I am so excited to let you all know that recently the region was selected as one of just 7 nationwide hydrogen hubs that will share a total of $7 billion of the Department of Energy investment. So what does this mean? It means thousands of good-paying clean hydrogen jobs in the Pacific Northwest, with priority going to former coal industry workers. It means removing about 1 million metric tons per year of CO2 emissions. That's about 220,000 gas-powered cars annually. And it means harnessing low-carbon hydropower that we are blessed with in the Northwest that might otherwise be wasted in order to produce the greenest hydrogen in the nation. But of course, there's much more work to be done, and I'm excited that APAICS is hosting this panel to explore how we can continue to innovate for a greener and better future. Thank you so much for taking the time to focus on this important work, and it's a pleasure to join you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Schreier. Next, I would like to welcome newly elected APAICS board member Joanna Dean, who serves as Group Vice President of Sales at Toyota Financial Services. She leads a team that works closely with the Toyota and Lexus divisions to bring a wide range of financing, insurance, and voluntary protection products to dealer partners. Most recently, Joanna was named an Automotive News Rising Star for her impact on the next generation of leaders in the automotive industry. She has also served as an executive sponsor for Women Influencing and Impacting Toyota, and is part of the Women in Sales Excellence Advisory Council, which develops talent and promotes diversity in field sales and within Toyota as a whole. Joanna has also served on the board of directors for Girl Scouts of Greater Los Angeles. Let's all give a warm welcome to Ms. Joanna Dean.
Good afternoon. On behalf of Toyota, I'm pleased to welcome you to Empowering Communities of Color in the Clean Energy Transition. At Toyota, respect for the planet is one of our core values, and it guides our clean energy efforts. Our goal is to reduce carbon emissions as much as possible and as soon as possible. This isn't new for us. We've been working on carbon reduction technologies since introducing the first fuel-efficient Prius back in 1997. Even beyond carbon, we're continuously seeking to reduce our environmental footprint. For example, in our early days, we created the Toyota Production System to guide our manufacturing processes. It's based on the concept of using only what we need when we need it. That helps us save materials and the environment while building world-class vehicles. Today, environmental sustainability guides everything we do across all of our operations in North America. Our aim is to go beyond zero. We want to create a net positive impact for society and the planet. We're working towards that by focusing on 4 priority issues that align with the life cycle of our vehicles: carbon dioxide emissions, water use, sustainable materials, and biodiversity. Now, to lower carbon dioxide emissions, Toyota makes a point of using electricity from renewable sources as much as we can at our manufacturing plants. We've already lowered our CO2 emissions across our North American facilities by 20% and are on track to be fully carbon neutral by 2035. Our new electric and hybrid battery plant in North Carolina will come online in 2025 using 100% clean energy. Now we're switching trucks and other vehicles to lower emission powertrains. Since 2010, CO2 emissions from our new vehicles have decreased 41%. Our goal for 2030 is to have electrified vehicles in 70% of our new vehicle sales in the United States. Water use is another important area to Toyota. At our plant in Baja, we've adopted the stricter international water standard and will be doing that at other facilities soon. We're also using more sustainable materials and vehicle parts to reduce the amount of waste that we generate. One of our biggest initiatives is recyclable batteries. Since 2010, we have collected and recycled over 178,000 hybrid vehicle batteries. At our new plant in North Carolina, we've created a sustainable, closed-loop ecosystem for manufacturing these batteries. And finally, we promote biodiversity by planting pollinator gardens and native species in our sites. We're actively working with nonprofit organizations to expand pollinator habitats and have added 2,000 acres since 2018. At our plant in West Virginia, well, we have a flock of 20 sheep that graze our solar panel to keep the vegetation low. Now, these are just a few examples of how Toyota is demonstrating respect for the planet. It goes hand in hand with another Toyota core value, demonstrating respect for the people. And we believe everyone deserves equal access to opportunity. And that brings us to the subject of our panel today, empowering communities of color in the clean energy transition. This important topic will focus on how we can ensure that no one gets left behind as we move to a healthier future. And now let's hear from our panel.
Thank you for all of your remarks. It is truly an honor to hear from such esteemed speakers. Our first panel of the APAICS Energy Summit is the Clean Energy Transition, Challenges and Opportunities. As with any change, transitioning to clean energy can be a bumpy road as we weigh the impacts of this change on present dynamics. This panel sheds light on the challenges, considerations, and opportunities as we develop and implement an energy strategy that propels the United States toward a sustainable future. This discussion will address questions around workforce development, hurdles in the legislative process at the federal, state, and local levels, and developing new technologies and research that support a shift to cleaner energy. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Carrie Ann Lee. Carrie Ann is the Director of Climate Policy and Appropriations at Pioneer Public Affairs, a clean energy, clean tech, and climate solutions government relations firm in Washington, D.C. At Pioneer, Carrie Ann develops strategies for her clients to best engage with the federal government and elevate important climate policies necessary to decarbonize our economy and protect communities from the impacts of climate change. Carrie Ann has also co-founded APAICS and Clean Energy, a professional networking group for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders in the DMV, District, Maryland, Virginia area, working in clean energy and clean transportation. Let's give a warm welcome to Carrie Ann and our panelists.
Thank you, Madeline, for that wonderful introduction. As mentioned, my name is Carrie Ann Lee, and I'm the Director of Climate Policy and Appropriations at Pioneer Public Affairs. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss the clean energy transition's opportunities and challenges, with a focus on how this relates to the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. I am joined by 3 excellent panelists coming with a range of perspectives and experiences. But before we jump in, I want to take a couple of minutes to give a quick lay of the land on the transition to clean energy. We're in a very exciting time in the clean energy space. At every level of government, throughout the private sector, all the way to the individual consumer, people are embracing the clean energy transition and taking advantage of the investments and opportunities to decarbonize our economy and society. In 2022, investments in clean energy generation technologies hit a record-breaking $141 billion in the US, And according to the Department of Energy, clean energy jobs grew 3.9%, adding 114,000 jobs nationally and increasing to over 40% of total energy jobs. This year will likely be no different, as 23% of electricity is expected to come from renewable sources this year in the US, and experts predict that the US could surpass 1 million electric vehicle sales this year. Just 14 months ago, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest climate investment in US history, providing a remarkable $369 billion dedicated to tackle climate change through clean energy tax incentives, grant programs, and more. Around the one-year anniversary this past August, the Department of Energy released a study that found the Inflation Reduction Act with the bipartisan infrastructure law will lead to greenhouse gas emissions reductions of approximately 1 billion tons in 2030 and enable the US to potentially reach 80% clean energy by 2030. However, fossil fuels currently dominate our energy production and consumption. Although many industry experts agree that we are moving towards more renewable energy and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels at a faster pace than expected, we have some ways to go, and there are some significant hurdles that could slow down our progress if we don't address them thoughtfully and strategically. I have no doubt that today's panel will address some of these challenges and opportunities. So let's jump in. We are joined by Representative Kirsten Kahaloa, Hawaii State Representative of House District 6, Eric Takayasu, Senior Vice President of Asset Strategy and Planning at SoCal Edison, and Dr. Joshua Kaakua, Academic Program Officer at the University of Hawaii. Thank you all so much for joining me for what I know will be a great conversation. I would love to begin by going around and having everyone introduce themselves and tell us what motivated you to work in or uplift clean energy. Let's begin with Representative Kahaloa.
Aloha mai kako. Thank you, APAICS, for having us today. It's a really exciting conversation. My name is Kirsten Kahaloa, and I am the state representative and a freshman legislator in Hawaii in the State House, and I serve the area of Kona on the Big Island. And I also serve on the Committee of Environmental Protection, Energy and Environmental Protection. So one of the reasons that this is an interesting topic of conversation is almost every piece of legislation that comes to the House comes through our committee related to clean energy. So I think there's two reasons I think this is important, is that Hawaii made a commitment to uplifting and meeting the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals in 2014. Our governor, every mayor, and over 100 organizations committed to meeting those goals, and we call it our Aloha Plus Challenge here in Hawaii. And so it's exciting that there are so many organizations and entities and government organizations committed to sustainability, and clean energy is the founding pillar of those goals. And in Hawaii, we want to get to 70% renewable energy. And that is our major clean energy goal in the layer of all the other sustainable development goals with the UN. And so I think it's just really exciting that we have an opportunity to reach those goals as a state, and there's strong commitment to that. But the other reason this conversation is important is Hawaii is one of the most expensive states to live in the nation. And if we can also meet our climate change goals, but also make it more affordable for our ratepayers to live here in Hawaii, and help us transition, but do it affordably, I think that's something really exciting.
Wonderful. Thank you. Eric?
Thank you, Carrie Ann. Great to be here today and look forward to the discussion. So I share a lot of the similar passions as Representative Kahaloa as well. And I work in the electric utility industry. And so I've been working in this industry for over 30 years. I spent the last 10 years working on clean energy strategy and issues and technologies. And I think, there's probably nothing more important today for us in terms of what we want to focus on as an industry. At the end of the day, the importance of moving into the energy transition is going to be public safety and affordability. We see the devastating impacts extreme climates have across our country, across the world. In California, we have been living with climate extremes here for a while, including the wildfire experience, which is as we see in other places. And so when you see the devastation that happens with that, you realize that there's a component of climate change that's already baked into the calculus as far as where we are today and where we're headed. but we need to do everything we can to curb the impacts of climate change. And this is where the energy transition is so important. We have so much work to do between now and to get to net zero by 2045. And I just think it's one of the most interesting times in our industry and one of the most exciting opportunities for us to collectively work together.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Josh.
Aloha, thank you. Thank you, Carrie Ann, and greetings to my fellow panelists and my colleagues out there in the virtual world in this to meet our clean energy future. I'm Josh Ka'akua. I'm with the University of Hawaii system. This is our state's, it's a 10-campus public university. We're the sole provider of public education, post-secondary education for the state. And I'm happy to join the panel and provide my perspective as an educator. I've been a educational administrator for over 20 years. We're quite interested in my role. I work on strategic planning, institutional effectiveness, making sure the things that we're doing at the university are aligned and sync up with what our employers are looking for, what our K-12 educational pipeline is providing, and what our individuals, whatever their goals may be, are we giving them that path out of poverty and into living wage and strong careers. And so that's kind of like the perspective that I hope to bring to the panel is how can you involve your education systems, your university systems, in particular community colleges. I am also interested in clean energy, as it's for Hawaii. It's one of our 4 strategic sectors that we think is really going to make a difference in our economy. So making sure that, as Representative Kahaloa shared, we bring with us in this clean energy transformation all members of our community as we design and go forward. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for that. And I'm excited for some of our questions and answers. So a couple of you touched upon this in your opening background and why you're in the clean energy space. But although Madelene and I both had remarks on the clean energy transition, I want to turn that back to you and ask, what does the clean energy transition and a just transition mean to you, and how does your work relate to that? Let's start with Eric this time.
Okay, sounds good. So I think I'll start off a little bit by giving folks an idea of Southern California Edison as a company. So we're an electric-only utility. We don't have any gas. We serve a population here in greater Southern California to tune about 15 million residences and businesses in Southern California. Our service area is pretty large. We cover a 50,000 square mile service area. We're bordered by Nevada to the east. We have the Bay Area to the north and San Diego to the south. So our primary business is infrastructure and the distribution and transmission of electricity. And we've been a leader as a company in providing the analysis and vision for what we believe it takes for the energy transition to get to net zero by 2045. We recently published a white paper. It's available on our website for folks that are interested. They can go to edison.com. It's called Countdown to 2045. It's actually version 2 of a paper that we did looking at this analysis. So where we are today, and we look at where the state of California is, it really is about moving away from fossil fuels in a very large way, enabling decarbonization that is frankly economy-wide. So we are helping to support this wide-scale level of electrification, both in transportation and in buildings, fueled by clean energy resources to serve all of that new demand. That is also enabled by a strong and modernized grid. So just a few examples of how widespread this is. Our analysis shows to get to net zero, we really need about 90% of light and medium heavy duty vehicles, and 50% light and medium duty was 90%. Heavy duty vehicles is 50%. It needs to be all electric. And then in the residential and commercial space and water heating, that number is about 95%. So that's a big departure from where we are today. And in the work that I do in the organization that I oversee, I lead our efforts in ensuring that our electric system, our grid, is reliable and ready to meet the needs of the energy transition. So it's evaluating and testing new technologies, putting together our plans to strengthen and modernize the grid that is climate resilient against the impacts of weather. And from a just transition perspective, I do think this really is about ensuring that everybody is along the journey. There are tremendous affordability benefits in addition to the fact that we want to breathe clean air. And so I do think that there's so much work ahead of us to get there, but that's really essentially what we're focused on.
Thank you. Josh.
A just transition, when we think of that at the university, we think about equitable access to education, making sure these opportunities and the benefits of our transition are shared. Often in Hawaii, we see some of the burden of our projects are disproportionately placed on some of our rural, some of our low income, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders. And so these are things that we want to be intentional about from the onset. When we plan for our heavy projects, when we plan for our the infrastructure that goes along with our development. And then I also wanted to mention about going beyond education and partnering with our employers about good jobs and quality jobs, and having some of these deep conversations about what does that mean? I mean, what does a quality job mean? And it can be regional. Like, for example, in Hawaii, we're having these conversations about what are commitments that our employers can make, and like, what do we value about job quality? And so job quality, it's kind of like a exciting time. I know the federal department, like labor, commerce, a lot of folks are pushing different aspects and different definitions of, these are different drivers of job quality. It's not just about pay, right? Things like respect in the workplace, upskilling, career advancement, respect and values, organizational culture, worker voice. So when we talk about a just transition, we want to make sure that we are designing to people have access to the type of education and the benefits that come along with education and training. And also in employment, how can people find careers that are meaningful? And so valuing, especially what the individuals and what the workers needs alongside with our industry and business needs.
Great, thank you so much. Rep. Kahaloa.
This is an exciting conversation, and representing the state and state government, oftentimes we're focused on legislation that supports clean energy and passing bills that makes it easier for us to reach our clean energy goals. So as we're doing that, we always have to look at, well, this bill may help us reach our energy goals. However, is it accessible? Is it going to be equitable for everyone? Can we ensure that it creates access, right? So I think for me, access and affordability is part of that piece of access to allow everyone to be part of our clean energy transition is what we look at. How we incentivize private organizations to build, as examples, EV stations when they're building new structures or new shopping centers. Can we ensure that there are stations across the state, even in rural communities, so that we're making sure that it's not just the urban areas that have access to this? We've always provided different tax incentives in Hawaii for this transition as individual households, whether it's adding rooftop solar, buying an electric vehicle. Those are some of the things we've done to make those incentives helpful to folks. But really, when we look at legislation, some of the measures, we really have to make sure that a just transition is part of that decision. Does it help as many people as possible? or does it support only a few members of our community? And when we think of Native Hawaiians and ethnic minorities here in Hawaii across the state, we really need to focus on that. The other thing for me with a just transition is workforce, how we diversify our economy, create green jobs and more jobs in this sector is important, rather than have maybe companies move in, help us transition our renewable energy goals and then leave. We need to focus on how can we move the needle with clean energy, but also diversify our workforce and keep the workforce local here in Hawaii. So whether that's job training, internships, skilling people up, or transitioning them to see jobs in the clean energy space is super important to me. And then, how we help make legislation easier to hit these clean energy goals is really important.
Really, really great. Thank you so much for that. And that's a really good transition to talk about developing that workforce to really support this clean energy transition. A recent report from Climate Power noted that since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, more than 16,000 clean energy jobs have been created in communities with sizable Asian American communities, and more than 40,000 clean energy jobs have been created in communities with sizable Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander communities. So I want to turn this to Josh, especially with your experience and perspectives. What barriers do you think exist in entering the clean energy workforce that don't exist for other sectors? And how do you think we should best address those challenges to make sure that this clean energy is a just transition for the workforce?
First of all, clean energy is quite broad, right? So and it might vary, from region to region. For the work that we're doing in Hawaii, we kind of lump in skilled trades with clean energy and green energy, and so the type of occupations that we have the most needs for are transportation, things in the areas of classic power and electricity generation, right? Building and manufacturing are project managers, and so this is in energy. I mean, this is everyone from your senior scientists to your engineers. For every engineer, we probably have 5 or 6 technicians and trades, and we want that skilled, both entry level and senior level, that skilled workforce from top to bottom. It's challenging in clean energy because it's so broad. And we're working on this. We're working on like in our K-12 education pipeline, we have these CTE, these career and technical education classic pathways. Healthcare, if you want to be a nurse, this is what you do. And if you want to go into agriculture, here's certain fields. And energy is kind of a newer. We're adding this to our K-12 pipeline. Of if you want to get into energy careers, these are the types of courses you should be taking as a middle schooler, as a high schooler. These are fields that you can get into if you're ready to go into work right away, into an apprenticeship, into training, into any number of our trades. There's a place for you, and so. Whether it be a 2-year program, an apprenticeship program, a 4-year bachelor's program, or a master's and PhD, we want it to be very tangible and visible for young people or returning adults to say, I'm excited about, vehicles, electrification of vehicles. What is available to me? What can I do? What kind of skills and programs? And our university systems, it's new to us too. We're kind of standing up new certifications and new skills and training that we feel that not the things that we think are valuable, but things that the employers are asking for. That's something new for us. It's really to make it based on what folks in the workforce are looking for. So I think that the novelty, the pace at which it's changing, I think that's newer for us in the clean energy workforce that we don't see as much in others of our classical educational pathways.
Great. Eric, so you heard a little bit from Rep. Kahaloa and also now from Josh on their thoughts on workforce development and definitely the need for it. But and it was kind of great when Josh was mentioning, from the industry side. So how do you see the clean energy workforce within the industry and within the private sector, and making sure that we have those folks to really get the clean energy transition going?
Yeah, and I agree with the points made, and that it is a very broad canvas that we need to cast here. Also, that there is, I would say, a shortage in skilled resources, both skilled as well as professional resources. And one of the challenges I see is that there's a convergence of industries that are looking for very similar types of talent. So when we think of all industries that are building infrastructure or working on technologies, because when you think about economy-wide decarbonization, it involves things like transportation and buildings in which other people are working. So what we see is a scarcity, an emerging significant scarcity in the amount of skilled resources of people who are able to take these jobs in the future. Couple things that we're doing. One is we are working with the local universities on looking at programs. We're also we have a Lyman Scholarship Program that helps to encourage people to understand a little bit. But I think one of the challenges that we've had, and particularly when we think about folks that are entering middle school and high schools, I also think that our industry has an opportunity to market this industry a lot better than it is being done today. So we're not, necessarily sending satellites to Mars and things like that. But when we think about automation, the technologies involved, just how broad this is, and the importance of the mission, there's no better, stronger message that we should be sending today to not only provide folks an idea that they could be part of this clean energy workforce, but that it's critical to our functioning society, to our economy, to drive these changes that are needed in a very quick and large way. So that's one of the things we're focused on, is how do we get to sort of the branding piece out here, in addition to all the program support that universities and businesses are going to need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that to both of you. So I kind of staying within the vein of the private sector, the clean energy transition will require participation from both, the public and private sector and working together. So Rep. Kahaloa, how can the government and private sector come together to better support the clean energy deployment? And Eric, I'll ask you the same question as well, but Rep. Kahaloa.
Yeah, it's gonna take all hands to come together to move this needle forward. I think one thing that's critical in this clean energy transition for Hawaii is land use. We have very limited parcels of land. And so when you think about, if we look at wind or solar, and in Hawaii we have geothermal as well, when we look at some of the different types of options, some of them require land space, and some of our vacant lands are available for maybe agriculture or conservation, but we may need to figure out how to be able to do that plus renewable energy. So it takes those difficult conversations and partnerships with government and private organizations to really work together to solve some of these concerns. And as we know, government made the commitment to clean energy and to get to 70% by 2030. We have 2045 goals to be net neutral. And as we do that, we can't do it alone. The private sector can't do it alone. So how we continue conversations to be able to work through challenges and reaching those goals are going to be really, really critical. As we know, Eric mentioned wildfires. We have our own wildfires consistently, and now with Maui, we know that grid hardening is a critical component in infrastructure to helping support clean energy transitions generally. So how we do that, it takes all hands on board and everybody in the public and private sector to really work together.
Thank you. Eric, do you have thoughts you want to add?
Yes, and a couple of things I want to key off of Representative Kahaloa, and talking about both infrastructure as well as the pace of change that's needed. So she mentioned 2030 and 2045 goals. one of the things that we did is we published a white paper recently on where we are relative to getting to 2030 and then 2045. Now, in the state of California, I think the state has done a tremendous job in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in light of a growing economy. So even though the economy has been growing, greenhouse gas emission reductions have averaged, since about the 1% per year in recent years. But when we did the analysis and looked at what it took to get to 2030, we essentially need to multiply that pace by about 4 times. And if we don't hit those 2030 goals, it adds an incredible amount of pressure to get to 2045. And we all know when it comes to doing things like building infrastructure or getting adoption of technologies that exponential curves are really hard to deal with. So action is really needed now. We also expect to see significant increases in the demand for electricity. So we need to increase and connect greater amounts of clean energy resources to the grid, as well as distributed resources that our customers will adopt. But I think customers also are going to be a big part of this energy transition. So imagine for the moment that everyone at some point is driving an electric car, they have solar on the rooftops, they have batteries at home. But imagine if you could also be a participant in helping to improve reliability and resilience on the grid and affordability by allowing those resources to provide the flexibility that we never really had before and we're able to unlock with technology and automation. So I think we need to think very differently about the energy system than we have in the past and really think holistically. But I think one of the headwinds we have here is the pace at which change needs to happen just to get to 2030, if not 2045.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to slightly switch gears for a minute. Obviously, this great energy summit is put on by APAICS, and so I want to talk about how Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders are part of the clean energy transition. So earlier this year, Axios published an article titled "Asian Americans Left Out of the Climate Movement," which opened with the line, "Despite elevated degrees of exposure and many decades spent advancing justice, Asian Americans have long been excluded from the national climate movement." So this question's for everyone. Looking at clean energy and making sure we don't leave our community behind, what role do you think Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities play in this transition? How do you elevate their voices or engage with these communities through their work? And what should we do? What should we be considering to ensure that they aren't left behind? I want to begin with Rep. Kahaloa.
Thank you. That's a really great question. I think culturally, Native Hawaiian communities, managing resources is what we know. It's part of who we are. We use what we have and what we need, but we don't take any extra. So I think this clean energy and renewable energy and sustainability conversations really culturally fit into who we are as a people. We have stories of Maui lassoing the sun, and part of that is capturing the sun, and that's one story that brings in, you could say, a conversation about energy. So we have a lot of stories and cultural history and the importance of how water resources are to our people. So these conversations are part of who we are. I think what we need to do is shift into that modern usage of those and how we can use solar energy, wind, and use those natural energy sources to power electricity. We have to bring in most of our current energy sources. So anything we have to bring in, if we can keep it homegrown in Hawaii and transition people's mindsets, that it's just like we say we want to grow our own food, that we want to grow our own energy as part of that conversation. And it's not about just jumping on this bandwagon of climate change. It's something that's intrinsic to who we are as a people. And if we turn those cultural stories and showcase those as stories really of renewable energy and sustainability, I think that would attract Native Hawaiians and all the various ethnic communities here in Hawaii. But we also have to make people see it in their communities. If people aren't renting, they're not going to be able to put rooftop solar. If they're not, if they're in rural communities, which a lot of Native Hawaiian populations are, They may not be used to seeing an EV station at their shopping center. So accessibility, I think, and access again is critical to uplifting those conversations. And working with community leaders in the ANHPI community, I think is going to be critical as well to these conversations of making it fair and accessible for every ethnic group and everybody here in the United States.
Thank you for that. Josh.
I want to echo what Representative Kahaloa stated about representation, engagement, having Native Hawaiians understand that this is part of our history. And for me, representation matters. I'm not in the policy realm, but having our Native Hawaiian caucus and having representatives like Kahaloa, it means a lot to our communities, our family members, Asian American representatives as well. And there's that trust that community members will place on their leaders, and there's also that accountability that we won't go down and say, "Hey, what's this about?" That this is disproportionately affecting my neighborhood or our peoples, and so to have Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians, civically engaged, represented, that's one of the strongest tools for community representation, community participation. On the university side, we are having those deep conversations about equity and diversity and inclusion generally. And Hawaii, we're a minority majority state, so a lot of times we think, oh, we don't have challenges or issues with diversity, and but we certainly do, and it takes courage in many different workplaces to really push the envelope on how can we get better, how can we be better. So we are having some tough conversations at the university about systemic racism, systemic barriers. We're not going to accept levels of poverty and systemic things that have persisted over the years. And so that type of aggressive conversation, I hope that people feel that have the courage to do this at all facets of our workplace across the country.
Wonderful, thank you. And Eric.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me in the article was a quote around how the AANHPI communities are less likely to report good air, water, and noise quality where they live. And adverse conditions, in my mind, these are going to be exacerbated by climate extremes. So there are issues. I would say there needs to be a focus on disadvantaged communities. And what I mean by that is not just from a financial income perspective, but from an environmental perspective. We have many disadvantaged communities that are located, say, adjacent to some of the locations that have the worst air quality along freeways, located in some of our hotter inland areas, where energy prices or the share of wallet is very high. So I do think there needs to be a lot more directed investment in those communities. For example, one of the things that we do as a utility here in California is we have programs that encourage more infrastructure on electric transportation, building electrification. But a significant part of those funds are directed at disadvantaged communities for the very reasons that were mentioned on the call today. But there's a lot more that's needed. I do think there's a lot more education with their stakeholders. There's public-private partnerships that need to be formed. I do think there's work across various levels of government to further incentivize the adoption of clean energy technologies, that particularly for folks that can't afford them today. So it's going to be important to ensure that our businesses and our communities, that our communities are not left behind. And that there does need to be better representation, I would say better engagement, education, and frankly, leadership.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for those answers. And I really appreciated Rep. Kahaloa like talking about how this specifically impacts Native Hawaiians, because this conversation is a good reminder that the AA-NHPI community is not a monolith, and that the challenges that impact our communities can vary. And so really digging into how this impacts Hawaii was really, really wonderful. But I want to end this on an uplifting note. There are a lot of exciting announcements and breakthroughs happening every day within the clean energy space. So for example, one of the areas of my work is supporting and building climate resilience, particularly within disadvantaged communities who are at risk of the worst impacts of climate change. And so last week, the Biden administration launched a $3.5 billion initiative to improve the resilience of the nation's power grid, which is valuable to ensure reliable energy with the shifting generation mix, and also critical as we see more extreme weather events. So according to the Department of Energy, the funds will be allocated across 44 states, totaling 58 projects, and will help bring more than 35 gigawatts of renewable energy onto the power system and invest in 400 microgrids. So I want to open this up for everyone. What is something that you are particularly excited about and want more people in our community to know? Could be a scientific innovation, beneficial tax credits for consumers, or just something on the horizon that makes you hopeful for our clean energy future. Let's begin with Eric.
Okay, well, there's a lot to be excited about what you just said. So one of the things I'll mention is that that is about investment in technology and our infrastructure. I would say the one thing that I want folks to be excited about is the affordability benefits of the energy transition. So in our countdown paper, we know that there's investments that are going to be needed. We know electric bills are going to go higher, but our analysis shows that the average household, when they make the energy transition, they likely could see a 40% reduction in their average energy costs. And that's if you add up all things in together, not just the electric bill, but the cost of gasoline, the cost of natural gas. If you look at your total energy bill, those that make the transition should see these kinds of benefits. And to me, that's really exciting, because not only are we going to clean up the environment, but we're going to help the economy, and we're going to help folks that need it the most.
Awesome. Josh.
One thing I'm excited about, this is more local, but in our state, we just launched a clean energy sector partnership. It was actually last week. And sector partnerships are a tool. They occur across the country, but it's sector specific, like healthcare for the Baltimore region. And the idea is you get all your major stakeholders together, and you commit to things that you can do together. So we have government agencies, we have our major utilities, we have a lot of our private employers. And this is kind of unusual for clean energy, because most of our developers are competitors, and they're just culturally very private in what they share, where they're headed. And so for this group to get together and say, hey, we have shared challenges. We're not going to get there unless we work together. And everybody getting together in the same room and say, I'm going to commit for the next 2 years. We're going to work together with our training organizations. We're going to work together with our community-based organizations. We're going to identify the things that we need the most, not just what my company needs, but what I think what we all need. And so to have a common voice for Hawaii's clean energy sector, that's so valuable. And we haven't had that in the past, and that's something that I'm excited about, making some gains there.
Very exciting. Rep. Kahalo, would you like to round us out?
Yeah, so many things to be excited about and optimistic about. And although we know that the wildfires across the country, but also in Maui, have devastated communities, what we do know is the commitment to not doing that again, and ensuring that we prepare our infrastructure to mitigate climate change impacts whenever we can, I think is the conversation that's on the table here in Hawaii. So $95 million commitment from President Biden post the Maui fires to harden the grid and put things underground so that in dry communities, we don't have utility power lines above ground. Those are some exciting things that, although it comes from something that devastated our community it's things we can look forward to, and it's conversations we're having to prevent wildfire management. And a lot of that is that shift to cleaner energy. And I'm hoping the fact that we also have geothermal in Hawaii, that we can work really hard to have those difficult conversations on how to use geothermal to help us meet our clean energy goals, but to ensure that it's not extractive for Native Hawaiian communities, that by utilizing some of those energy resources that we have, we're also giving back to communities so that communities benefiting as part of the solution to get us to our clean energy goals. So I think what I'm most excited about is that we're having really deep, hard conversations that will help us reach our goals, but just make our communities more clean, more resilient, more sustainable, and just hopefully making it affordable so people can still afford to live in Hawaii. So there's a lot of excitement around reaching those 2030 goals, those 2045 goals, and working together to get there. So it's super exciting.
Well, thank you all so much for participating in today's conversation. We covered a lot on the clean energy transition, especially on how we ensure that the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities can play an active role. Despite there being challenges, this conversation highlighted that many exciting and new opportunities exist. And that leaves me very hopeful and grateful that folks like our panelists are out there supporting this transition. Again, thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you to our audience for watching.